Warframe has been out about a decade now, and as a result, we've seen a ton of meta shifts. And nowhere is this more evident than with our little dude Loki. This bad boy used to be objectively considered an S tier frame. I'm not talking I personally think, I'm not talking debatably S tier. I'm saying to you right now into your ugly face that he was objectively, non-debatably a fact that he was S tier. So what happened? Why do people now consider Loki to be a low tier frame, maybe C or even D? I've seen people put him on. Loki has not been changed almost at all since launch. He's had a few adjustments, most of them have been bug fixes. The game has changed significantly around him. Crowd control used to be extremely important. Loki's 4, which provides lots of crowd control, was a must-have option. Additionally, we didn't have shield gate, so being able to be invisible and throw down a decoy to draw attention, these were huge. This was before Steel Path. So honestly, it comes down in large part to Steel Path being introduced to the game that diminished Loki's quote-unquote viability. But as you could probably tell, I strongly disagree with that. And today I'm going to look at a master race Loki build that includes 3 augments and no helmet. I believe that if you are to use a helmet ability on Loki, you might as well just use another invisible frame. You could use Ivara, you could use Ash. These frames are much more tuned to having an ability just removed off of them for something better. Whereas Loki, I think that every single ability that Loki has can find use in some particular way, and nowhere is this more evident than if you're using his augments. In case you're unaware, his augments recently just got buffed. He had some of the single worst augments in the entire game, and now they're actually usable, but there's a caveat. I strongly believe that 2 of these augments at least are only usable if you're using both of them. So this is a 3 augment build. And another reason why I believe that Loki is now coming back into the master race realm is because of the Archon shards. Sure, every frame can benefit from Archon shards, but some benefit much more. For example, frames that need cast speed. Well, you just freed up a mod slot. That's kind of a fucking huge deal, freeing up a mod slot. And Loki is in a similar place where now he can make use of mods such as combat discipline. Previously, because he has no innate HP regen, mods like this were completely impossible for him to use. And if he did try to use it, you were going to struggle significantly and it was just going to be unenjoyable to play. I'm sure there's some min-max way where you could just barely get it to work, but the stress it would cause you and having to make precise inputs 24/7, it's just too much. So this is a build that takes into account a fun playstyle while also using Loki as Loki. We're not using Loki as Saren. We're using Loki as Loki. So let's get into my mods and why we arrived at this situation. I normally go over Archon shards first, but I feel like in this situation, you really need to understand the mods. So we're running combat discipline. This is our peg leg. We really need this to amp up our damage to a considerable degree. In case you're unaware, combat discipline will hurt you when you kill stuff. Typically, a lot of people would think, hey, let's just max level everything, right? Well, if you max level combat discipline, look at this right here. Lose 10 health on kill. I don't think you understand. 10 health on kill is kind of a lot if you're killing a fuck ton of shit. Kind of a lot. So that's why we're using it unranked. As a result of that, we have to have lots of forma. This is a 5 forma build. So this is not for the faint of heart. And part of what draws into combat discipline and really makes it excel, and is the reason we're using it, is Arcane Avenger. In case you're unaware of what Arcane Avenger does, basically just gives you flat critical chance. And it's not multiplying your critical chance. So say you have something with 0 critical chance, well guess what? Now it's a flat 45% critical chance. That is a big deal. So these 2 little accoutrements here are a very large part of the build, and we were unable to really get the most advantage of these before, because aside from new arcanes they just added, there was no real way to heal. And even with those new arcanes, in order to take advantage of them, you need to cast an ability, which is not always an ideal scenario where you have to cast to survive. So we're going to go back to look at the Archon shards. As again, we mentioned how we're going to lose health for each kill. We're damaging ourselves so that we can proc Arcane Avenger. So as a result, I have 2 blue Archon shards that give me health. The 2 is a little overkill. Honestly, if I just had a Tau single blue shard, that would probably be enough. But the reason I'm running 2 is because I once had a match where I had multiple big grouping frames. I had a Vauban, Gyre with a Cathode Grace, and we had like a Necros or something like that. But we had a lot of grouping, right? And I noticed that even with my only 1 HP lost per enemy kill, I almost killed myself. It wasn't 1 HP away from dying, but it was close. And so by having 2, I never have to worry about that very specific scenario again. It's obviously not going to help at high levels of Steel Path. HP is kind of irrelevant then, because even with 10,000 HP, you can get 1 hit. But this is making it so that we never ever have to worry about killing ourselves. And because of that safety we have, it allows us to greatly amplify our damage without having to use Eclipse or Roar or some other third-party buff. Also, why I don't like bringing stuff like Roar or Nourish is because these days everybody has them. Why would I bring something that everybody is using? That's boring. It's just a personal preference. Run whatever you want. And then we also have a little tiny bit of casting speed. It does help everything a little bit. Where it doesn't help, Switch Teleport has a cooldown where you use the ability and then there's a cooldown phase. It's only 0.5 seconds, but I don't think that cooldown part is affected by the cast speed. Regardless, just a little bit of cast speed on Loki makes his entire kit feel a lot more streamlined. And another reason we're using it is because it's very often we're going to be using multiple moves in quick succession. So for example, we're going to throw out Decoy and then we're going to switch Teleport with it immediately. But having 2 interactions, even if they're only half a second at a time, those are half-second intervals where you're not doing any damage and you could potentially die. So by having this little bit of cast speed, we're mitigating a deficit. Additionally, if I do ever get a Tau cast speed shard, I will put it on Loki. I think that I think it would bring it to 37%. It would really make it super comfy. And that's another thing about this build, is that I prioritize comfiness and viability. If you only prioritize viability and being the min-max, that's not always fun. That is fun sometimes, but I personally feel like after a while, I need to switch to a comfy build. Even in Dark Souls, for example, you could be a hyper build that just one-shots Michaela in 2 seconds. Other times you want to be a Faith build. This is kind of like your Faith build. We do also have some duration on him, and not really a big deal. You can put whatever you want there, but I have 30% duration solely, again, for quality of life there. Now, for the mods, we're going to start all the way at the left, Rolling Guard. This is keeping us alive. This is mainly for when your invisibility runs out. We do have a very long time on our invisibility. It's about 39 seconds. It says 34, but we're bringing multi-efficiency, which increases our duration. So it's about 39 seconds, and when it runs out, it's nice to have a guaranteed you're safe, right? And then overextended. It's mostly there to help with our radial disarm. It's bringing our radius to 24 meters, which is pretty significant. And we do need this because we're bringing narrow-minded for more duration. This is minusing our ability range. We can just dump strength. You really don't need strength on Loki. I know there are some strength builds, but generally speaking, you do not need any strength on a Loki. Now let's scroll down here to continuity. We are using duration because we need duration. It's as simple as that. Then we're using equilibrium. This is your flex slot. I don't consider any of the augments a flex slot. You may consider hushed invisibility a flex slot if you have some sort of silenced weapon or you put a mod on it, but I'll explain why I'm using that in a second. Let's get back to equilibrium. This again is your one flex slot. I like it because it's healing you, which is kind of like, it doesn't really matter. We're using the synth set. If you're unaware that the synth mods are, we'll get to that in a second. But it's basically just a nice quality of life, right? We're going to be able to get a lot of orbs just generally from gameplay scenarios. Like if you've played this game, you understand orbs drop. So I just think that this is an excellent mod to have. It's a good quality of life. But if you really want to kind of min-max and you think that, oh, I can just run generic, I never have to worry about energy or anything like that, then I would recommend you not run Prime Flow, but Vigorous Swap. Just get a nice damage bonus there. I think that's a fun little thing to do and really ramp up your damage as a weapon platform. So now we have all these generic ones. Prime Sure-Footed. If you don't have Prime Sure-Footed because you're a pleb or you're new or what have you, I would recommend using just normal Sure-Footed, honestly, or Power Drift. You may think that you don't need Sure-Footed, but when you get knocked down in Steel Path and then you get killed, you're very quickly going to realize that you need it. People who say you don't need Prime Sure-Footed, it's because they haven't gotten to high-level Steel Path. They may have done 20-minute Steel Path mission, but when you get to level 500, level 1000, level 5000, you very quickly realize if I get knocked down, I'm fucked beyond belief. I am back of the bleachers, whole football team raw dogged in the anus, and there's nothing you can do about it except bring primed Sure-Footed. So that's why we're bringing that. Now let's get into the augments. Again, I said that you can swap hushed invisibility out for something if you have it, but this is my case for why this is a good mod. Hushed invisibility just reduces your weapon noise by 100%, right? That's one mod slot. If we were to throw that on the, say, the Septima Exponentificil Tenet Arca Plasmor, we would be losing range, and range on shotguns is very important because it's essentially just more damage, which is nice. So we would have to swap this off, right? And then we would also have to swap whatever you may have on your secondary. A lot of people on their secondaries, especially because of the ammo change, they're bringing like primed pistol ammo mutation or something along those lines, or ruinous extension. You know, most people have a mod that they need in their secondary slot. And because we already have a flex slot on Loki, I feel like just freeing up 2 mod slots is a massive quality of life thing. So, you know, you could always swap that out, but like I said, it's 1 mod slot that's saving you 2. Sure, those 2 mod slots are not like game-changing mod slots, but they help a lot. If you're gonna look me in the eye and tell me that galvanized acceleration is not a significant boost to your potential damage, then I think you're fucking insane. We're going to go back to the mods. So Hush Invisibility, I have made my point for why I need that. Now this is where it gets confusing because most people think that Decoy's absolute trash. There's no reason to bring it. And I say nay, it can be good. So it can be good in several scenarios. So before we even get into the mod, let me explain to you some of the scenarios in which it can be good. There's a lot of places where you can put decoy where nothing can shoot it. There's out of bounds areas that I've learned of. There's even just, I've already cleared this area in an exterminate mission. I can just throw my decoy here to mess with the enemies. There's also scenarios where the enemies just have no way to hit it because of where it's placed. So there are places even without the mods to make decoy more than viable. In case you're unaware, decoy does have a shield gate, but I believe the shield gate time is 0.1 second. 1/th of a second. So that's not a lot of time, which is part of why we need the cast speed. So the augment we're using, which is Save Your Decoy, this increases our decoy cast speed by 50%. Again, we're using 1 singular Archon shard that increases our cast speed by 25%. So we have 75% extra cast speed. Because of the like millisecond shield gate that this has, and because of our extremely fast cast speed, we're able to cast this, have it lose its shield, have that shield gate for a split second, and then safeguard swap to it so that it's invincible. We're using safeguard switch. So when we swap with an ally, it will become invincible. Because of all this duration we have, that invincible time is 17 seconds. That is very large. So when you pop decoy, you safeguard switch to it immediately, right? We have fast cast speed, so that's not an issue. Then your safeguard switch decoy will have a guaranteed 17 seconds of being alive. That is a lot for something that draws aggro from everything in the room. That is a lot of time. Now, on top of that, because the natural nature of decoy is enemies shoot at you, as Loki, you don't want to be shot at or be near anything shooting. So you're putting yourself in danger potentially by swapping with your decoy. Sometimes the decoy won't swap where it is and you'll just go to it. Other times you'll swap places. I don't understand it. I've been playing Loki for years. I can't figure out any forum posts that explain to this. So if you know why specifically, sometimes when I swap to my decoy, it won't swap, I would love to hear it. And no, it's not because I'm doing it in an end zone. I understand if something's in a goal zone or what have you, you can't change it out of there to prevent trolling. So I really don't understand why it does that. Regardless, and we're running safeguard switch, which makes our target invincible. And because we're also running save your decoy, if we are to die, we will instead swap to our decoy. If we're putting ourselves in the face of danger, or if we're just making our decoy invincible, it doesn't matter. Either way, we have a safety layer here because of both of these mods working with each other in tandem very well. Additionally, you could also be super safe and safeguard swap to an enemy because it'll make you invincible for almost 9 seconds. And then you could swap to your decoy and make sure your decoy is invincible for 17 seconds. As you can tell, it's a circular build where everything works together, and it kind of shows why there's no helmet ability on here. You could argue maybe put one in radial disarm, but here's why we're using no helmet. Typically, you start missions, you go invisible right away, right? I think that's pretty standard. And then when we get into combat, we can either just immediately switch teleport in there to just be invincible and be able to not worry if we're being shot at or if our teammates are being shot at. So it's great for co-op play. And then we can throw out our decoy and swap to that when things start to get a little bit heated. Now, when we're really in oh shit, once we've done all 3 of those steps and we're in the oh shit territory, that's where the radial disarm comes in. This is your supreme oh shit button for when you can't aim at something. If you can aim at something, just switch teleport, man. You're invincible for 9 seconds. A lot of people talk about how great rolling guard is because of the 3-second invincibility. Fuck the status removal, like that's obviously good, but a lot of people are just using it for the invincibility. And I think that switch teleport is a very misunderstood ability because I don't think most people realize how nice it is to be invincible for 9 seconds as opposed to just 3. And that's another thing. It's basically 12 seconds of invincibility because right when it's ending, you can roll and guard to extend it. So it works very well with roll and guard. And the whole build, like I said, nothing could really be wiggled out of here except for maybe possibly radial disarm. The only reason I say that you can possibly take this out of the equation is because, as I mentioned, we're pretty much invincible. Either we're invincible or we have a decoy that's invincible that we'll teleport to when we die. So we have a lot of backup strats to make sure that there's no way we can possibly die. So that's why you could even swap this out for like Nourish or Eclipse or Roar, like I said. But I really like the ability to just disarm an entire room. And part of that is it doesn't really interrupt the flow of combat. Some crowd control moves just pause things in place, or it causes them to follow an orb around. It can potentially lower your kills per minute because stuff isn't waltzing into your death. But when you radial disarm, they have no choice but to pause for a split second to pull out their knife, and then they're walking back into you. So it's a nice little bit of breathing room while also making sure that everyone is safe now, and it can potentially speed up your DPS a little bit because stuff is running into you as opposed to seeking cover and whatnot. So that's the long and short of the build. I hope I explained that succinctly. Now let's get into the weapons that I specifically bring. You can really rock anything on him, right? And I'm bringing the Septima Expantificil Tenet Archiplasmor. This is a raw damage build. We're using corrosive and heat. It does have a mag progenitor, which might not be the best for min-maxing, so to say, but we're only missing out on a little bit of damage because of it. And as a result of that, we're getting a little bit of convenience so that when we're dealing with any sort of shielded enemies, we don't have to swap to our primer in order to deal with them. So it's for a little bit of convenience too. You may just solve that problem by swapping Banes every mission. I don't like doing that, and it's kind of an inconvenience to me. I'm all about convenience and fun and optimization. So it's a hybrid as all of them instead of just the rigid min-max. And then we're using a primer, of course, the Pox. You throw this out, it's a cloud, it applies statuses. We're using Blast and Corrosive because the Corrosive is a big damage dealer against the Acolytes. Additionally, the status effect between Blast and Corrosive, they're very good statuses. A lot of people sleep on the Blast status effect. I like it because when you're playing as Loki, you want things to be inaccurate so they're not hitting you because you're squishy, and they're not hitting your decoy because your decoy is squishy, right? Sure, we have a bunch of backup methods where we can literally be invincible, but it's still nice to have yet another assurance policy on top of everything else. Additionally, the reason why I don't have something like viral or heat or what have you on here or slash is because we're offloading that to our melee weapon. Our melee weapon is kind of another form of primer. The Pox will always apply viral, heat, and slash and everything else because of the secondary encumber arcane, but the Neferi is our backup strat. It's our insurance policy. Sometimes you'll be versing an Eximus, sometimes you'll be versing an Acolyte, sometimes you'll be versing a boss. You need the viral, the heat, the slash right away. Typically, with most enemies, most fodder, you can just throw out the Pox. Whatever random statuses it's applying are enough to kill it with your shotgun blast or whatever primary you may be using. But the Neferi is our backup strat. Sometimes you will need it immediately as opposed to any random status is good enough, and that's where this comes in. It's especially useful because it has a flamethrower attack, so you can apply this to stuff without having to be next to it, which is important when we're playing as Loki, someone who's squishy, even though we have like 10 million invincibility strats, but it's always nice to have another, right? Let's take a look at the special companion. This is another one of our backup layers. We have backup strats on backup strats. So a lot of people don't realize you do not want your companion shooting shit as a stealth frame. As a stealth frame, it is a very quick death sentence to have stuff shoot at you because they're shooting at your bot. Now, that being said, again, we have backup strats on backup strats, so you could potentially put something on Loki more than you could another frame, like the Ivara or what have you. But we're going to start with the Hellstrom here. Normally I do damage with my Hellstrom. I have a God Roll ribbon for it and 2 close to God Roll ribbons. So this is just a pure stat stick. It will not shoot, it can't shoot. And I'll explain why in a second, but we're increasing our crits from primary weapons. So again, it's stacking really well with Arcane Avenger. We're getting some bonuses for aim gliding and whatnot, which is wall latch duration, giving us more crit chance and status chance. Actually kind of a legit thing. And then everything else, it's just this big fat stat stick, and it's not going to shoot because there is no shooting mod on it. We don't have the assault mode or thumper on it, so it will never shoot as a result. Now, where you put the mods on your companion does in fact matter. We have Sacrifice, Primed Regen, Guardian, Shield Charger, Medi Ray, which previously this was one of your main forms of healing without the Archon shards, but it's not enough. It's really not enough. It's inconsistent too. And then we have Reawakening. This one's very important. It's only available on Dingeon and it lets it recover itself. This pairs very well with Sacrifice. This was from an event a long time ago. This mod's probably worth 100 plat or so, give or take. I'm not sure anymore. But basically, this will revive us. Again, we have backup strats on backup strats on backup strats. We don't ever have to worry about our fucking random teammates ever again. And we can pick up ourselves. We can deal with ourselves. You'll probably never get downed and you'll never need this, but it is nice to just have that backup layer, especially if you're doing a solo mission and like say your dog's barking or something like that and you get distracted and you get down. It happens. I'm sick of people acting like they've never gotten down from an extenuating circumstance like their pet or what have you. This is just that nice little reassurance. Then of course, primed animal instinct. We need to find enemies to kill stuff to have a high kills per minute, which is very important for some missions rather than others, but we need it. Vacuum because we need to pick up stuff. And then of course, as I said, the synth mods. So these are doing 10% magazine reload when we melee or when we holster. If you melee, the weapon swaps away. So we have very good uptime on our weapon. Anytime we can mitigate not doing damage, it means we're doing damage. So for example, where you're swapping to your operator to heal, which is what people used to do, and then swapping back. Yeah, sure. Technically, you are healing yourself. You're not doing damage. You're not doing damage. I don't understand how people don't understand. You're not dealing damage. It makes no sense that you think that swapping to your operator and swapping back is a viable way to take care of your health resources, especially when you're using something that drains your health resources. It's not. You don't actually play this game if you think that pausing all of your damage to heal is a good idea. You need to get your ass back on the short bus and loosen that fucking helmet. So that's essentially the long and short of this build. I really enjoy this build. I think it holds up greatly after all these years of playing. I think that this is a return to form for Loki. You know, I've been a Loki enjoyer for a long time, but honestly, when Steel Path hit, it really felt like I got nerfed hard. It felt like it was a hard nerf. And I think a large part of that is, again, because the decoys are so fragile, and I didn't understand that even enemies in this game have shield gate. It's so minuscule, it's hard to notice. It's like a single millisecond. So after learning that, and specifically these augment changes, his augments were some of the worst augments in the entire game, really insultingly bad augments. It is a fantastic change that he had multiple augments buffed all at once, because previously his most used augments were for radial disarm and the hushed invisibility one, like I said, which some people, you know, they use the Baza Prime. The Baza Prime's their thing to use, so they don't need that, but I do use it. So I really do think that Loki holds up today a lot more than he did just a year ago. I hope you enjoyed this little jaunt through why I find Loki to be a very viable frame even today. So thank you for watching my video. The only way that you can let me know you enjoyed it or felt some sort of way is if you go to your local city council meeting the next time they have one and just sit and listen to all this fucking bullshit these idiots are saying. They're not questioning anything. I guarantee you, you ask these people at city council a question or two, you're going to end up getting thrown out. They're going to get real pissed because they don't know the fucking answers. And if they do, they don't want you to know. So that's my advice to you, is go get thrown out of a city council meeting. Get on that post haste.